Hello and welcome to this edition of TZM Global Radio. I'm your host for today, James Phillips from TZM Education and the UK chapter of the Zeitgeist movement. Hope you're all doing well out there, guys. The introduction for today's show was a bit of music called Fire in the Booth from a rapper called Akala, socially conscious rapper who is really quite popular here in the UK. I think he writes some really good lyrics about where society is at, and it's really good to hear that sort of music, not just talking about carrying a gun and how many gold chains you own. It's really refreshing. So, for today's show, the plan is just a little smidgen of news, and then I'm going to crack on with reading the next couple of articles from the section Minds in the Making from the TZM Education website. And really, the news is basically that our Z-Day here in London is nearly upon us. We had to do it a little later than everyone else. So the details for that are that it's going to take place on Saturday the 25th of April at Conway Hall in Red Lion Square, Holborn. It's in London. And the doors open at 10:30 and close at 5, but we're going to go to a pub afterwards as well. So the events for the day are that we've got speakers from Positive Money. So we should have Ben Dyson talking from Positive Money, and that's regarding the negative impacts of fractional reserve banking in particular on society. David Wood from the London Futurists on technological unemployment. Martin Wilkinson, the brother of Richard Wilkinson, who we featured in quite a lot of our works to do with income inequality. He's going to be talking about that subject, but expanding it into the impact that it has on the environment, which should be quite interesting. And we'll have an introductory talk from the UK chapter coordinator, David Dan, just outlining what the movement basically advocates, and then a further talk by myself to kind of wrap everything together into why what the movement advocates is still relevant, still important, and why we need to get the structure in the UK chapter, and of course in chapters around the world, really functioning much more fluidly if possible. Of course, that's always difficult in a movement that essentially is a volunteer movement with no money involved. That can be a challenge, but it's not completely insurmountable. We could run things a little better. Speaking of which, remember that we've got teams that are always looking for people who can help them out. So the translation team and GCA are always looking for people, just off the top of my head, so please do get involved with helping them. And Dave Lucas is going to be giving a talk on some of Jeremy Rifkin's work on the Zero Marginal Cost Society and the economic safety net, and some of the sort of transitional platforms that are starting to take shape around the world. So that should be a very interesting talk as well. Okay, so without further ado, I am going to get on with reading these next articles. The first of which is called Building a Learning Environment. Building a learning environment. We are in constant interaction with the environment and external influences, so school is not the only place in which we receive an education. We continually learn from new experiences and react to them through an intertwined, complex interaction between our unique individual set of genetic propensities and their reaction to, experience with, and influence from environmental stimuli. This point is expanded upon in the article The Impact of Human Nature on Educational Approach. How do we learn? There are several varying aspects regarding some of the ways in which human beings take in new information. Here are some useful articles and websites on the subject, and you can find them on the TZM Education website, which is www.tzmeducation.org. The core attributes of learning can be broken down and summarized in the most rudimentary sense to three categories. 1. Listening. 2. Seeing. And 3. Hands-on experience. An education system built for learning. In classes of up to 30 or more with children from different backgrounds and needs, It seems a near impossibility to adequately cater for all three of these approaches in accordance with an individual student's learning preferences. The one-size-fits-all approach currently practiced in schools, therefore, seems to run in direct conflict to this varied way in which people learn. An interesting online model seeking to change this approach from within the current educational system is Khan Academy, and you can go to www.khanacademy.org to check out what they're doing. Also, it's worth considering whether children require so much of a teacher's attention to learn effectively. The idea of autonomous learning is laid out in the following TED Talk by Sugatra Mitra, I think I pronounced that right, on the self-teaching method. In an NLRBE, the economic pressure for certain members of the community to engage in many hours teaching at a time would be removed, along with the need for paid employment to make a living. This would enable parents and other community members to spend more time with their children and take up the highly rewarding endeavour of learning and teaching. Without the obstacle of the price mechanism and with more resources available through the quantum shift in the wasteful economic practices of today, we could build many more invigorating, hands-on, varied and intriguing learning experiences. Far from an easy ride, this style of education would demand that a student consistently prove that their idea works in the real world as part of a collaborative and direct association between their effort and the improvement of theirs and everyone else's collective standard of well-being and living in their local and global community. Controlling human behaviour. The effects of the behavioural techniques of Taylorism and B.F. Skinner show that whilst this approach of operant conditioning is effective in many respects, it's also limited in that it only measures behavioural outputs rather than the internalisation of an idea which motivates an individual towards action. These methods of reinforcement must therefore be consistently maintained for the desired behaviour to continue. In an NLRBE, the need for these tactics would be greatly diminished through the deliberate automation of human labour. By deliberately moving towards the abundance and efficiency in manufacturing of goods and services via automation, nearly all the goods and services required to meet the needs of everyone in society could be met with near zero employment. At this point, the need for jobs to acquire purchasing power becomes technically obsolete, and along with it, money. All of this is of course only possible if the complexity of economic calculation can be taken into account, something that's now entirely possible with artificial technology and computer algorithms. This issue's gone through in greater detail in the article The Journey to Money. So if there's no money and all the goods needed to sustain oneself are available without a price tag, then the alleviation of this pressure and subsequent reduction of social stress would unlikely leash a wave of social empathy, creative potential and positive solutions never before witnessed in human history. This approach of strategic efficiency of course challenges the age-old notions of working for a living, but perhaps this notion, like that of slavery and the burning of witches, will be viewed with a similar disgust and contempt in years to come. I would personally much rather welcome a child to this planet by telling them that considering all the amazing technology we now possess, their life needs will be met no matter what, and then inviting them to contribute where possible to society in whatever intrinsically inspires them to do so, rather than the current underlying philosophy that even in the wake of this awesome technological capability accrued through the trial and error handed down to us by generation upon generation, they must still earn their right to life on this planet by getting some sort of job in the marketplace, regardless of whether they like it or not, or if it serves any meaningful social purpose whatsoever. It may be worth asking if the value placed on hard work in the education system is even a noble or preferable trait to impart to the next generation. The downside of hard work. In my personal experience as a drum teacher, I've found that a large percentage of my students tend to do a task with a sort of gambler's mentality. Going too fast initially, repeating past mistakes and failing to isolate problematic sections of the music, yet hoping somehow that the next attempt will bring about a positive result, where the many previous attempts did not. Why do we humans do this? I asked many of my students what they feel is reinforced in their classrooms on a daily basis, working hard or thinking hard, and the answer is usually always working hard. Is this really the best notion to be imparting to children? Whilst we must of course work hard to attain results, cause and effect should make this point without too much need for reiteration. Anyone who engages in a task is doing so for some sort of reasonable rate of return, and the speed of this rate, the reinforcement, is critical if motivation in the task is to be maintained. A figurative example could be that you may wait in a restaurant for a meal for 30 minutes. You may even wait an hour, but no hungry, sane person waits for 2 hours. The same is true for anything else. Doing the same thing over and over again, even though it doesn't get the desired result, could in fact be defined as insanity. But as noted earlier, this is precisely what an awful lot of us do when attempting to solve a problem. This tendency must at least have a part of its roots in an educational system that reinforces the ideology of hard work over thinking first, and the lack of veneration given to taking shortcuts. This last statement regarding the encouragement to take shortcuts may sound like a negative attribute to promote, but I'd invite you to take a look around you for a moment before arriving at this conclusion. The chances are that you're viewing this article on a device which has made it possible for you to talk to someone on the other side of the planet almost instantaneously. You may also have machines nearby you that wash and dry your clothes, do your dishes and keep your food cool. Every single one of these devices is a shortcut of some shape or sort. There's absolutely nothing wrong with taking shortcuts if they lead to the desired result. What people perhaps mean when they venerate hard work in and of itself and denounce shortcuts is that you should ensure that you are using the right method in a given task, or you will simply only end up making more work for yourself in the long run. That's perfectly reasonable, but a more adequate explanation might be to ensure that the appropriate methodology is taken in a given task to begin with. This stipulation is not a trivial one, but rather an essential part of creating a creative generation of problem solvers who think before they engage in the very obvious amount of hard work it takes to be successful at anything worth pursuing. For example, when I stop and ask a student if they could suggest a different method of approach to solve the issue at hand, they will make many logical suggestions in this regard. Whether it's slowing down, isolating troublesome sections, or attempting to consciously recognize a recurring error and focus on not repeating it. One thing is certain, they are never short on providing different options of approach, and when they do so, it is like turning a key in a lock. The overarching point here is that we must make sure that we reinforce the idea that children should think hard before working hard and not the other way round. Breaking the pattern of failure. The value of working hard over thinking hard is also reinforced through slogans such as "practice makes perfect," "if at first you don't succeed, try again." These phrases are in very common use by teachers and parents alike, without a proper evaluation of the underlying meaning being imparted. Clearly, if you are practicing something incorrectly, then it really doesn't matter how many times you do it, you will simply continue to get it wrong. Worse still, if you persist in doing this, then you will actually get better at doing it badly. An emphasis placed on the value of persistence in the pursuit of mastery in any field should seem obvious enough, as of course you cannot succeed at anything without effort, and often a good deal of failure and suffering. Persistence, in my experience, however, is far easier to attain when autonomy and purpose are given the space to flourish. This point is outlined in further detail in the article A Change in Educational Incentives. Personally, I've always applied myself with far greater diligence and vigour towards tasks that I was intrinsically motivated to do, completing them to a far higher standard than any that involved coercionary tactics on the part of a figure of authority. Setting the conditions for positive values to flourish. If we seek a shift in these behavioural tendencies, then we must do more than just speak about such a thing. We must build schools, homes and communities that are localised, collaborative systems of exchange in every area possible. elevating the teaching of critical thinking, and strive towards obviating the need to rely on the current socio-economic system and the use of money wherever possible, and in doing so, helping to build a new, emergent, collaborative mindset and economic model in the midst of the current outdated, competitive one. If these notions are not in the forefront of our minds when moving forward in all areas of our lives, then the age-old problems that emanate from such perspectives will continue to persist. So therefore, I'd ask you to please take the time to visit the Action in Education section of this site and join in this global initiative to go into your local schools and universities to communicate these ideas to future generations. Okay, so moving on to the next article. It's in Article 6, entitled Building a New Paradigm from the Inside Out. This phrase is worth keeping in mind in any action taken towards the promotion of the train of thought necessary for the transition to an NLRBE. Whilst we should of course be endeavouring to spread awareness of the train of thought needed for this new socio-economic paradigm to emerge, we should also ensure that we are practicing what we preach wherever possible as well. Whilst we may know that this often only amounts to patchwork, if we instead see it as part of our overall communication of the train of thought, then this may help to motivate us towards taking positive action in how we arrange our lives, setting an example to others of what it would mean to live a sustainable life. This is why striking the common ground with organisations who are trying to effect the sorts of changes that would undermine the dependency on the current system and bring about the conditions required for an NLRBE should be actively supported in their endeavours by advocates of this direction. In this way, when we talk to children at schools and encourage them to be the light of change they would like to see in the world, we will not only be leading by example, but we will also be giving them on-the-ground examples of those who are attempting to initiate a positive change in their local communities. The following are some examples of possible changes in lifestyle to both starve the beast, so to speak, and also promote a more positive, sustainable and collaborative disposition. The first of those videos is a brief one on the benefits of a vegan diet by Dr. Neil Bernard, and a second one of a trailer for a documentary called Cowspiracy. Those two videos really go through some of the health benefits and then some of the environmental consequences of animal agriculture on the environment. Then we've got Cal Earth Ecodomes. Go to calearth.org to check out those. They're a very, very cheap way, inexpensive way of building a robust home, as are earth ships. Plastic bottle structures can actually be built now to provide shelter. Boat living, as I went through in a radio show beforehand, I actually live on a canal boat with my fellow activist shipmate Sarah from TZM Education. It's generally a lower cost way of living, but if you want more details on that, go back to the previous radio show on that subject. Convertible mobile homes are an interesting way of living and getting off the grid. Community living. There's lots of communities who are attempting to sort of do renewable energy and sustainable farming and things like that. Less dependency on the market system, basically. Open source ecology, very interesting group that do a sort of tool set, if you will, for building a whole new civilization at very low cost. Tool libraries, we've got some members who are involved in tool libraries, so rather than everybody owning one of everything, just like you go to a library and you borrow the tool for a shorter amount of time, it obviously is less resource intensive. So, local food production, that's Incredible Edible Network. And there's also food sharing schemes, that one of which that was gone through at Berlin Z-Day, that's well worth checking out. To stop wasting the food we are producing at the moment. It's obviously hideous that we produce enough to feed 12 billion people but still have a billion people on this planet essentially starving or undernourished. So transition towns, That's a very popular network here in the UK, at least. It's looking to initiate renewable and sustainable localized production here in England. Gift economy, things like free cycle, local currencies. There's many of them here in the UK. Time banks, I'm sure you're all familiar with. Bitcoin as well. So those are just a few examples. The new engines of social change. An interesting initiative for social change which has gained some traction in recent times has been the promotion of a universal or unconditional basic income for all citizens in a given country or region. This could be an important step toward making sure that people feel some sort of security in being able to meet their life needs so that they can then have the freedom to engage in more meaningful and positive social enterprises. The following blog entry helps to sum up this initiative. That's from the Zeitgeist movement blog on universal basic income, a Trojan horse, as well as the following talk by Federico Pistono, What if Everybody Got Free Cash? Some other transitional ideas are contained in this short documentary entitled Enough is Enough. Very good, and many of the organisations featured in that documentary are going to be at London Z-Day. So, engines of social change with a direction. Ultimately, such initiatives should eventually lead to a system of decision-making which is more aligned with an empirical understanding of the reality and life ground we all share. We cannot afford the complacency of thinking that this will come about by itself, or that such social initiatives as the ones mentioned in this article will be enough to solve our collective environmental, social and economic woes. As stated in the article Changing Educational Incentives, the entire edifice and underlying calculation metrics of our socio-economic system is based upon growth, inefficiency, obsolescence and competition. To expect collaboration, efficiency and sustainability from such a thing is, to put it mildly, naive in the extreme. Whilst the initiatives laid out in this article should be welcomed and engaged in as a necessary step to take in terms of transition, the point regarding the need to shift to a steady state, sustainable economic and social system must not be ignored or downplayed. The efficacy of and need for an educational and communicative approach. A useful analogy to make might be that of a university course for a doctor. Do we want our doctor to have taken that university course and have had a rigorous amount of scientific and medical training before seeing us, or just go straight on the job because he or she has read a few blogs on the internet? The same could be said of our entire culture. The self-appointed guardians of the status quo rightly say that we need to tackle issues such as income inequality, climate change, environmental degradation and alike. But yet they seem unable to see that the reason for these problems in the first place is the system we are using, and which they ultimately still see as valid. Even if they did admit such a thing, most are seemingly unaware of our current technological capability to provide an access abundance for all of humanity sustainably, and the effect that this would have on human behaviour. Once again, even if they do know all of the above, then they do not present a viable alternative socio-economic framework capable of delivering such conditions. The need for a revolution of values is one thing, but equally as important is the need for an appreciation, digestion, and well-rounded education and comprehensive understanding of these factors. This is why the advocacy and education toward an NLRBE is such an important endeavour, and why, given the current state of affairs on this planet, it is frankly laughable to hear the criticism of such an action as not doing anything. On the contrary, I'd attest that for the reasons noted above, this educational and communicative approach is perhaps the most important of all activities any concerned citizen of Spaceship Earth could possibly engage in. Changing education to change the world. In much the same vein as the prior point, if we are seeking to change the education system, then we must also be clear about why we are doing so and where we are headed. We undoubtedly need a change in both education and our socio-economic system if we are to move forward in creating a more peaceful, sustainable, humane and collaborative approach to societal and planetary management. By learning more through the information on this website and at thezeitgeistmovement.com or thevenusproject.com, for example, engaging in the ongoing TZME activism project, visiting other sites featured in these articles, and helping these groups in their endeavours wherever possible, we can start to have a serious influence on the education system and society at large, making the shift in values required for an economic model which meets the needs of every member of humanity more than just a dream, but a reality. Will this journey be hard? Absolutely, but anything worth doing always is. It could be said that if you ultimately value living a life of personal integrity, then the finish line you seek is found in the day-to-day, moment-to-moment process of living that life in accordance with your values. So please do take the time to visit the Action in Education section of this site and join in this global initiative to go in your local schools and universities to communicate these ideas to the future generation. So that's the end of this article. The next article I'll be reading is Building the Perspective for a Positive Future and an Effective Communicative Approach. But I would just like to reiterate a couple of things about the Action in Education project. Just a couple of sort of queries I often get just to clear up. Most people think that, well, how on earth do you get into schools, with this kind of information, that they wouldn't let you go in there and pollute young minds with the ideas of sustainability. Well, they will, but you've got to have a certain tact in how you do it. This is all laid out in detail in the Action in Education section. All your questions will be answered, but just very briefly. When you phone up, you don't say, we're the Zeitgeist movement. You don't say, we advocate an economic model that doesn't use money. You don't say that you don't say any political phrases at all. You go in there with and ask questions that they can only answer one way. So you say, does your school like the environment? And think that we should be doing something about climate change. And the school's going to say, yeah. You say, do you like science? And they're going to say, yeah. Well, when shall we come in and talk about science and technology for human and environmental concern then? You can say, you could say you're from the Zeitgeist movement. That's fine. I suppose you've got to say you're from somewhere. But generally speaking, you've got to take the path of least resistance and go for the low-hanging fruit. So the low-hanging fruit being children have the ability to understand this. The path of least resistance is what I've just outlined. That's how you get your foot in the door with schools. Now you might be sitting there thinking, okay, yeah, that makes perfect sense, but it's not for me. It's not in my character to do such a thing. Well, then someone in your chapter needs to be that character, basically. I'm sure there's someone who sort of fits the bill, who could go in there and talk to kids on their level a little bit with this sort of stuff. But you know what? If there's no one who you think really fits that sort of role, then take one of the videos from the Action in Education site, go there and just play the video. It's not as interactive. I'm not a massive fan of that direction particularly, but give it do something, because essentially there is a captive audience who are ready to be able to hear what we have to say, and they're just sitting there waiting for you to say it. So I'm sure you can probably think of many things that you do in your local chapter, and when you really think about them, they're probably not that effective. I'm sure we can all improve how we're doing things. So just some food for thought there about how to actually engage in these sorts of activities. Okay, so I'm done for today. Thanks very much for listening to me, everyone. Once again, I hope you're doing well, and if you're in the UK, I hope to see you at our upcoming Z-Day event on April the 25th in London. You can sign up for that by going to our meetup page. If you just type in Zeitgeist London Meetup or something like that, go on there, you'll find the event. Make sure you go and book your tickets through the event page, and I'll look forward to seeing you there. So I'll leave you with the fine words of Mr. Akala again. Till next time, take care of yourselves, guys.